This is the BioCentury Show.
Brought to you by the 13th China Healthcare Summit. Join BioCentury, Bay Helix, and Insights partner McKinsey & Company in Shanghai, November 2nd to 4th, for a first-hand look at China's innovation moment.
I'm Jeff Cranmer, Executive Editor here at BioCentury. My guest today is Frank Jiang, EVP and Chief Strategy Officer of Hengrui Pharmaceuticals. Dr. Jiang has over 40 years of experience in medical practice and pharmaceutical industry leadership. He was the founding CEO and chairman of Hong Kong-listed biotech CStone, and before that, he was the global VP and head of Asia-Pacific R&D at Sanofi. China's speedy clinical development and robust cross-border deal-making is the talk of biotech conferences around the globe. As such, there are few people better positioned to discuss China biotech at this time than Dr. Jiang, as Hengrui has been one of the most prolific deal makers of the past few years. From everything such as NewCo deals with Western VCs to broad alliances with pharma such as GSK and Bristol Myers. Frank, welcome to the BioCentury Show.
Well, thank you, Jeff.
All right. Well, let's set the stage for where Hengrui is today by looking at where China biotech is today. Some of our listeners are well versed in China biotech, and some they still need to see China for themselves and to really understand what's going on. So, Frank, after years as a source for generics and Me Too's, China has become a source of innovation, fueling pipelines around the world. Can you take us through this evolution? Was the key the reforms of a decade ago?
Was the key of the reform that took place 10 years ago. I think that's your comment. And I think you're right. And there are three key drivers, in my view, that has led to this evolution of the innovation journey. The first one really is the significant unmet medical need. If you were to look at cancer as an example, between two largest cancer countries, China and the US, we would have twice as many of new cases each year compared to that in the US. Whereas if you look at the 5-year survival rate, then China will fall significantly short, something like 30 to 40%, whereas US will be 70%. One of the critical components is that we're lacking of affordable innovative medicines. And it's not surprising if you were to look at the US market, 80% of the components are innovative medicines, whereas in China, less than 15. So there is a strong desire to develop innovative medicines and to address this significant medical needs. There's a second driver, which is really there's a serial pro sort of innovation policies released by Chinese government. One of them is the regulatory reform, and by far the most impactful, and having accelerating the approval timeline for IND and NDA that certainly put China into the global development map. Joining ICH is also an important approach to put the data quality, consistency into the, again, global development. And attracting the private funds, especially to support the innovation development, is also very important. As you know, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange modified the rules. Therefore, the pre-commercialized company or biotech can be listed and raise money for the R&D activities. Finally, I think return on investment is also an important approach to sustain the R&D innovation, and the commercial insurance that recently has started would be able to address that. I think that's second key driver. The third, which is very important to mind, is that our Chinese as a delivery-focused way of working is very critical.
Yeah, let's dig into that a little bit. The R&D efficiencies, or as many love to call it, drug development at China speed. What drives that, and are there more efficiencies to gain by China's biotechs?
Yeah. So let's look at the speed first. And if you were to look at the R&D drug development value chain, early research, translational medicine, and clinical development. And I think we are anywhere between 20 to 50% of average global timeline. And of course, there's also a cost cut within that shrink timeline. And there are a few things to look at. The first one, if we were to look at the research part, we're essentially fast-driven, fast follow-driven, and meaning that probably limited efforts in the new target or target validation using focused library and existing scaffold for target. And secondly, we're working very closely with the CRO, and the CRO has been essentially of all kinds and they're sophisticated to do many different tasks in the research arena. And in many cases, we actually co-locate with the CRO. And third is parallel execution. This is very important, obviously, to help the timeline that perhaps to do multiple animal species at the same time, rather than sequential, and also holding all the critical components on the one roof, like GLP tox, translational medicine, biomarker, and the CMC. And this is really to generate the sort of cluster effect. So that's a research. In the clinical development, that's even more so, right? We have only 1.4 billion people in China. That's a huge source of patient. And then there's a tendency that the patient tend to go to large city, high-tier hospitals, so they tend to be concentrated. I was told, at the top hospital, the leading oncologists, for example, they would see some over 1,000 patients a year, and that would be 2 to 3 times more than in the US. And there is also a ecosystem coordination toward a better patient recruitment, management, and putting in clinical trials. And there's our principal investigator would have a access to the hospital alliance or sort of WeChat, and also the there are SMC sitting in the site. A site management organization sitting in the site, working very closely with the team and resolving issue as it rises. So I think there's efficiency, there is efficacy there to solve the problem. And finally, that as you know, that IIT investor initiated trial in China is very well organized, and so we were able to do cell therapy, gene therapy, and RDC, and so on and so forth. So I think these are some backing of our efficiency from structure perspective, from mindset perspective, from the ecosystem perspective.
Excellent. And WeChat, of course, for those who don't know, is the all things social media. It's every social media app in the West that you can imagine rolled into one handy app. So let's turn to deals, Frank. What's behind this current boom in deals? We've tracked it over the past decade or more, and it's just up many-fold. And each year seems to come with more deals and in more varieties of deals.
Right. So let's talk about the number, quantity, and then let's look into why these quantity come from. So if you were to look at last year, 2025, probably 30%-ish of the global licensed assets are coming from China. So that's a huge chunk of the assets coming from China to the global. And if you take a look at the total value, that's actually almost half of the assets that gone through the partnerships. And more importantly, if you look at the upfront, which is real cash, that's also significantly increased over the last few years. So So it is to say that there are a lot of activities in BD front. Also, to your point, is that the models of the BD in the last few years has also evolved, starting from straightforward out-licensing to something more engaged, what I call setting up a NewCo, and to something we see most recently a very engaged, multi-dimensional sort of strategic alliance. So I think what really makes that happen are two words: the innovation quality and innovation efficiency. Let me elaborate a little bit. For the quality innovation, starting from the quantity, if you were to look at the innovative pipelines today, globally, 1/3 from China. And if you look at the clinical trials for registration purpose and for MRCT, again, there's a significant increase from China in the global map. So that's the quantity. And if you were to look at quality as a result from, many of the practices, is that there is a rise in first best-in-class molecule asset from China. Taking Hengrui as an example, we have this PD-1 VEGF small molecule in first-line liver cancer. By far, the data median overall survival rate is the longest of any combo therapy in that patient setting. And most recently, we also learned that Akeso's PD-1 VEGF obviously HARMONi-2 and beat Keytruda in PFS, right? And then if you were to look at, obviously B1, I mean, their BTK is really generating tremendous, very positive stories and making that is a global sort of a success. So that's the rise in the best-in-class as a sort of a quality. And second would be, if you were to look at the US FDA's different designation for the Chinese trials, breaking through, fast track, orphan designation, and these are increasing over the past several years. And then if you were to look at the top journey publication from research end, Paper Science, Cells, Nature, and to the translation part, you have a Science Translation Medicine, and then to downstream of the clinical development, you have New England Journal of Medicine, JAMA, and Lancet. There's an obvious apparent increase of the number in these journeys coming from China. And finally, I think BD deals, the fact that we just mentioned the number and quality of the BD deals are a way of a vote of confidence from multinational companies. So these are some, I think, quality and efficiency. I've already mentioned earlier that if you were to look at the whole R&D development chain, you're anywhere 20 to 50% on average of the US, and then there's a cost efficiency as well.
Excellent. And those Akeso data, I think they really did a lot to open up eyes around the world. That program, of course, partnered with Summit, originated, of course, at Akeso, which is running many of the trials itself. Staying with deals for just a minute, and we're going to, in the second part of the show, we're going to dig into some of the deals that you've been the architect of. I was curious, we're starting to see, we've had a lot of NewCo deals for a few years now. Deal terms are changing somewhat, bigger upfronts. And we're also starting to see these deals that are called co-co deals. And it's very cool to see your company have co-development, co-commercialization. I'm curious about, are co-co deals only for the biggest companies such as yours, or do you think smaller Chinese biotechs, when they partner, could they expect to get co-co rights?
Yeah, so for the co-co, we skip to the straight out licensing or the NewCo setting. They're somewhat different. Now, co-co, I think, is a part of the comprehensive partnership alliances, and whereby there have a designated clinical trials, and you would split the cost to different percentage on each partners, and eventually when it comes to the market, you will also have a proportional right to do the commercialization. I think for a large pharma like Hengrui, we actually have a $5.8 billion in the bank. I think we would be able to come up with some money to support this important journey, and to do the co-development. And you know that global development is not cheap. So I think for biotech, it depends upon their financial strength and their aspiration and the nature of their assets and eventually what they want to do, basically. And I don't think it's a no for biotech, but I think for the large pharmaceutical company like us, it will be easier to do co-co with multinational companies to do global trials and global commercialization.
Makes sense. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to dig into Hengrui and its deal making and its pipeline. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
This episode of the BioCentury Show is brought to you by the 13th China Healthcare Summit, taking place November 2nd to 4th in Shanghai. Everyone has an opinion about China biotech, but there's a difference between reading about cross-border deals and seeing it for yourself. The 13th China Healthcare Summit brings you to Shanghai November 2nd to 4th for a first-hand look at China's innovation moment. Join BioCentury, Bay Helix, and Insights partner McKinsey & Company for a deep dive into China's biopharma ecosystem and meet the biotech leaders who are driving all the news flow. Sourcing innovation, building NewCos, generating faster clinical data, reimagining your R&D strategy. For a dozen years, the China Healthcare Summit has gathered the right people to network and build business. Now it's your chance to be in the room. Join us in Shanghai this November. Opt into the tour of Suzhou and a visit to Shanghai Clinical Trial Centers. See it for yourself. Register at biocenturychinasummit.com.
We're back on the BioCentury Show. I'm Jeff Cranmer, Executive Editor here at BioCentury, and today I'm speaking with Frank Jiang. He's EVP and Chief Strategy Officer of leading China biotech, Hengrui Pharmaceuticals. Let's turn to Hengrui now. Hengrui was founded in 1970. It has evolved from a company strong in generics to a company with one of the largest innovative pipelines in Asia, if not the world. Frank, take us through Hengrui's evolution.
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. And I think you're right. Hengrui started in the 1970s, and initially, for the first 20, 30 years, was very focused on the generics, probably first to the market generics. And this is really to grant patient critical access to the medicine in China. So that's a very important stage, what we call the generic era. And at the turn of century, the company evolves into the innovation transformation, where the company actually listed in Shanghai stock IPO and raised 58 million R&D US dollars, and a large proportion of that has been used for the Shanghai R&D center build up. And I think the objective in the next 10 years was essentially to leverage a fast volume to continue addressing unmet medical clinical needs in China, and very importantly, build a ecosystem to discovery, development, and commercialization of innovation medicine. Now, in the last 10, 15 years, and what we are moving into the third stage, which I call new era of a global expansion, and really utilizing multi-pronged approach to generate BIC or best-in-class or first-in-class assets very efficiently. And there's also an accelerated global expansion by global partnership and expansion of the in-house operation. So in the year 2022 to 2025, 2023 to 25, and we had 13 deals, and recognizing the Hengrui's R&D quality. And in 2025 to 2026, we had a Hong Kong IPO, and also expansion of our global operation. So take a snapshot of where we are today. Is that this is our leadership in China is our company is actually one of the top 50 pharma in the world. In the most recent ranking, it's like one of the top 30. It's number one in China by market size and the number of NMEs, and the success was essentially backed by over 9K commercial FTEs. And we have 12 state-of-the-art manufacturing facilities. Obviously, innovation is our growth engine, and we are global top 2 by size of our originated pipeline. Mm-hmm. We're currently running over 400 trials for 100 plus NMEs, and last year we recruited 21,000 patients, and we have 15 plus cutting-edge technology platform. This is where the innovative medicine or source of innovation coming from, and we have about 20 potential first-in-class, best-in-class coming to clinical trial every single year. And the company has a very strong financial stand. We have $5.8 billion in the bank. Well, last year our revenue was $4.6 billion, and we're both Hong Kong and Shanghai Stock Exchange listed. Now, we are becoming also a trusted global partner. We have done 13 out-licensing deals, ranking number 1 since 2023, and essentially accumulating to $42 billion in the total deal value. That's again number 1 in China.
How do you, with so many assets, how do you think through what to prioritize across all your therapeutic areas at this point?
Yeah, that's a very good question. There's this huge amount of needs in China, and you probably cannot do everything, but you have to focus on those that are most important. And thinking of the company starting from oncology base, and obviously the oncology is a very important therapeutic area that we have, and we also have cardiovascular metabolic, and we also have immunology and respiratory, and finally we have neurology, CNS. So we have 4 therapeutic areas, and currently, as I mentioned, 100 molecules in the clinical development, 20 molecules coming to the clinic every single year, and so we in the distribution we would have 40 plus phase 1 molecules in the phase 1, 30 plus in the phase 2, and 20 plus in the phase 3, and 10-ish in the NDA stage. So it's a very healthy structure. And when it comes to the oncology, then we have our approach to the strategy is that for the very important disease, like a lung and breast, that we have what we call one-stop shop for Hengrui. And we cover all the sub-disease type, all the lines of the therapy, from a perioperative all the way to first line, second line, and third line, and even beyond. And finally, all the mechanism of action. So whatever the patient has, when they come to us, and we have a one-stop shop for you. Looking at the vast the pipeline, we obviously have the opportunity to combine them together for combo, and in the hope of generating 1 + 1 greater than 2. And finally, that we have obviously undergo tremendous internal iteration for next generation molecules to overcome the resistance from the previous one. In the cardiovascular and the metabolic, we're focusing on the heart failure, ASCVD, and obesity and diabetes. For immunology, we're focusing on we actually have built 17 molecules with 31 different indications covering respiratory, dermatological, rheumatology, and renal and GI. So it's really a broad areas in that therapeutic. Finally, for CNS, we have a pain management focusing on the now 1.8 platform, aiming at acute and chronic pain. And we also have a brain shuttle a platform for neurodegenerative disease that offers multiple modalities such as bispecific antibody or AOCs, and also we have a stroke. So we are very focused on the 4 therapeutic area, essentially addressing significant medical needs. in China.
Excellent. Well, I wanted to shift gears a little bit, kind of thinking through how you've evolved so dramatically. You're dual listed. How has Hengrui's shareholder base evolved with the company as it's made these transitions?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because the company was privatized and before 2000 and was really listed in year 2000 in the Shanghai stock market. And now it is more diversified with a strong base of global institutional investors, such as Capital Group, Wellington, Fidelity. I think the Hong Kong listing, what we did last year, was an important step in that journey, which has helped us to continue attracting high caliber, high quality global investors. Just very briefly, and it was the largest healthcare Hong Kong IPO over the last 5 years, and there was a significant oversubscription, 15 times over institutional and 450 times over retail, and we raised $1.5 billion US. And there were premium sort of cornerstone investors. You got GIC, you got Invesco, UBS, Boyu, Hillhouse, Millennium, and Oaktree, and anchor investors cover most of the global top-tier institutions. So, Jeff, moving forward, as we expand our global presence, we will continue to build a diversified shareholder base with a focus on long-term and high caliber investors.
Excellent. I want to get into the deals now. It's you've been keeping us very busy here at BioCentury. You've made quite a few deals over the past few years, and they've been of a lot of different flavors. Out-licensing deals straight up, NewCo deals where you pony up an asset, you partner with Western VCs to build a new company, and then you've had these broader partnerships with companies such as GSK and BMS that you alluded to earlier. How do you think through which type of deal works best for which asset?
Yeah, obviously that I think we're very fortunate to have the asset that have global play, and this is obviously consistent with our strategy to develop a globally differentiated pipeline, and therefore to maximize these globally differentiated pipeline value becomes a strategic imperative. Now, then come to your question is that which path do you take? I think it depends upon our strategic aspiration and competitiveness of the assets, the nature of the assets, the financial on the table, and the flexibility of the model we wanted to insert. And currently, we started with pretty straightforward out licensing year 2023. As you can see, that these are relatively simple, speedy, and sure money, and proven model. It's a very proven model, and also low ongoing burden. You just one off, and then you do the you pick up the milestone, and eventually, hopefully, there is a royalty. And obviously, moving on to 2024, we did a NewCo with Bing and Kylera. A few of our weight loss assets incorporating into the Kylera. And this is where we actually own certain parts of the company. And therefore, you're looking for potentially the upside, right, in the long term. And there is a closer interaction because you are serving on the board, maybe in the governance and of the company. And therefore, you are more engaged in the development. And with the NewCo, they would have the very best team for that particular assets together for the development, and you would be able to learn and working together. And so I think this is somewhat different. In our collaboration with these NewCo, there is an additional advantage, which is really, in many cases, we China develop a little faster of the same assets compared to global. And so they actually can leverage the data that generated from China to the to discuss with the US FDA and therefore modify their global trial, maybe smaller or maybe skipping of certain stages of the trials, and even more efficiently to deliver that trial to the global final approval. And finally, for the cocoa development, I think it's very different. This is really a cause for a multi-dimensional collaboration, and this is not just the clinical asset, and you out-license to somebody, and then you do work together. And this is in addition to the clinical asset, you also will have preclinical development, as in the different stages in clinical. In clinical path, it could be PCC, could be past PCC, could be prior to IND or across to close IND. And also it could be something is totally new in the discovery frame, and you don't even have a target. You wanted to work together to find a new target. So there's 3 different buckets, those that are in the clinical, those are still in the preclinical, those are still not even born. And so that will be the the framework for comprehensive alliances. And the advantage obviously are when it comes to the clinical development or for co-development, when you come to clinical development, and there is a share of risk, a share of the cost, right? I mean, in the global study, it's not cheap, and it's really, I think it's important that we committed to the success of that trial, and also there will be share of profit once the study becomes successful in NDA and on the market. There's a second component for us to in the cocoa situation will be we would be able to learn. Very quickly, hands-on experience in the clinical development, and also in the clinical development as well as the regulatory, and also CMC and the commercialization. So I think this is the added value to us. And finally, I think there is a strategic transformation for such deal, such alliances. This is not one-off. Right, and we're building up a long-term alliances, and we're essentially in the ecosystem with the eco partner.
Tell me, do these deals then set you up to become even more of a global company, maybe boots on the ground in the U.S.? How is your globalization strategy evolving as you enter the GSK deal, the BMS deal?
Right. We have a 3 strategic pillars for globalization or global expansion. And the first one really is to connect to the global capital market. And as we have discussed earlier with Hong Kong Exchange, for example, the key purpose would be strengthen the Hengrui international branding. And the second will be use the proceeds to fund global R&D activities and infrastructure build up. And third would be attract the global talent. And to your question specifically is that to leverage the power of partnership and through the business development, and to bring us to a point where we can learn and adapt. So this is a very important, and obviously that's the second dimension we have. And the third dimension that we have in the establishment of our global presence would be in-house development and the commercialization. We're adopting a stepwise and a very disciplined approach to gradually enhance our global presence over time. So we do have a presence in the U.S., in the Europe, and in Australia, and for our mostly clinical development.
Excellent. Well, I'm afraid that's all we have time for on this edition of the BioCentury Show. Frank, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Thanks for joining us. And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
Brought to you by the 13th China Healthcare Summit. Join BioCentury, Bay Helix, and Insights partner McKinsey & Company in Shanghai, November 2nd to 4th, for a first-hand look at China's innovation moment.
Kendall Square Orchestra provides the music for the BioCentury Show. The group connects science and technology professionals and other members of the greater Boston community to collaborate, innovate, and inspire through music while supporting causes related to healthcare and education.